Part 1. The fluorescent light in the expansive, luxurious honeymoon suite of the Grand Mariner Resort seemed to amplify the tremor in my hand. My fingers, usually steady and reliable, accustomed to the precise lines of graphic design, were now betraying me, shaking so violently that the slender, elegant champagne flute threatened to slip from my grasp and clatter against the polished, marble-topped side table. It wasn't the weight of the delicate crystal, of course. It was the weight of a different kind of pressure, a pressure that had been building within me for months, and now, on this pivotal night, had reached a fever pitch. "Mrs. Emily Carter," I whispered, the words barely audible above the soft hum of the air conditioning, testing the sound of my new name, the name that had been bestowed upon me just hours ago, in a ceremony steeped in tradition and the promise of a shared future. It felt foreign, unnatural, ill-fitting, like a dress borrowed from someone else's closet, too tight in places, too loose in others, a costume I hadn't chosen, a role I wasn't entirely sure I wanted to play. Just hours ago, I'd walked down the aisle, my arm linked with my father's, radiating what I hoped looked like pure, unadulterated happiness, the kind of joy that should accompany the beginning of a lifelong partnership. I had smiled, I had laughed, I had exchanged vows of love and fidelity, all while my stomach churned with a different kind of emotion. The truth, however, was a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach with each step, with each whispered promise, with each glance at the man waiting for me at the altar. Mark, my new husband, the man I had pledged my life to, was in the spacious, marble-clad bathroom, showering. The sound of the water a relentless, almost hypnotic drumbeat in the otherwise silent, opulent honeymoon suite. The rhythmic rush of water was a constant reminder of time ticking away, of moments slipping through my fingers, of the inevitable consequences of my actions. He was probably scrubbing away the lingering scent of Aunt Carol's heavy perfume. She had a habit of hugging a bit too tightly, leaving behind a cloud of sickly sweet fragrance wherever she went, and the remnants of his wedding jitters, the nervousness that had been evident throughout the day, the slight tremor in his hands as he tried to feed me the cake. Jitters I, in truth, didn't share. Or rather, I shared different ones, anxieties born not of the fear of commitment, but of the reckless, impulsive decision I had made, the secret I was desperately trying to bury. The real reason I was anxious, the reason my heart was pounding in my chest like a trapped bird, wasn't because of the monumental commitment I'd just made, the promises I'd uttered with such conviction. It was because of what, or rather who, was waiting for me downstairs. I snuck a surreptitious peek at the sleek, brand-new phone, a gift from my bridesmaids, tucked away in the mirrored vanity unit of the other room. I really shouldn't have gotten a new phone before this day, but I needed to be accessible, I needed to communicate, I needed to be ready, and I did. It was the only way. I wanted to be ready, and I did it for a good reason. The message was still there, its words now etched into my memory. "I'll be waiting. David." Mark's best friend, his confidant, the man who had stood proudly as the best man at our wedding, delivering a heartfelt, slightly embarrassing toast that celebrated our love. David, with his easy, disarming smile that could melt the iciest of hearts, with his kind, intelligent eyes that seemed to understand me better than anyone else, with a physique honed by years of surfing and a mischievous streak that was both thrilling and dangerous. And the man I'd been secretly, desperately, irrevocably in love with for years. The forbidden pull between us, the undeniable attraction that had simmered beneath the surface of our friendship with Mark for years, had been a constant undercurrent, a dangerous, thrilling secret we shared. Now, on what was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, the night that marked the beginning of my marriage to Mark, that undercurrent was about to erupt, to crash over me like a tidal wave, carrying me away from the life I had chosen, towards a future I couldn't even begin to imagine. Part 2. The shower stopped abruptly, the sudden silence amplifying the pounding of my heart in my ears. The bathroom door creaked open, a slow, deliberate sound that seemed to echo through the entire suite, announcing Mark's imminent arrival, the arrival of the man I was about to betray in the most profound and unforgivable way imaginable. Mark emerged from the steam-filled bathroom, toweling his dark hair, his face flushed from the heat, his eyes sparkling with a mixture of contentment and exhaustion. He was undeniably handsome, with his strong chiseled jawline that spoke of determination and his kind, hazel eyes that radiated warmth and sincerity. He was the epitome of the good guy, the reliable partner, the loving husband. And I was about to shatter that image, to destroy the trust he had placed in me. He was dressed in a soft, terry cloth bathrobe, the epitome of comfort and luxury, but I wasn't really able to focus on all that. The guilt was kicking in. He came to me, his footsteps soft on the plush carpet, his intention clear. He wanted to embrace me, to celebrate our union, to consummate our marriage. He wanted intimacy, affection, a connection that I was incapable of providing. Not tonight, not with the secret I was harboring. I was the poison. I grabbed a small bag from the side. I tried to grab it, but he got there first. "Everything okay, Em?" he asked, his brow furrowing with concern, his voice laced with a hint of worry. He could sense my unease, my discomfort, the barely concealed panic that was bubbling beneath the surface. He was perceptive, intuitive, and that made my deception all the more difficult. He was the most gentle person I knew, and it was hard knowing what I was about to do to him. "Just tired," I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. It was a long day, all the dancing, all the socializing. The smile I forced felt brittle, unnatural, a poor imitation of the genuine joy I should have been feeling. The guilt coiled tighter in my gut, a venomous serpent constricting my chest, making it difficult to breathe. Mark was a good man, a genuinely good man, a man who deserved better than what I was about to do to him. He didn't deserve this betrayal, this deceit, this heart-wrenching act of infidelity. He had loved me unconditionally, had supported me through thick and thin, had always been there for me. And I was about to repay his kindness with the ultimate act of disrespect. I couldn't do this, I shouldn't do this, but the pull, the desire, the need was too strong to resist. Mark suggested ordering room service, a gesture of caring and consideration, a suggestion that was perfectly innocent, perfectly reasonable. He was trying to make me comfortable, to ensure that I had everything I needed. But room service was out of the question. It was a potential obstacle to my plan, a distraction that could ruin everything. The longer I stayed in this room, the harder it would become to leave, to carry out the act I had set in motion. That was the distraction that could ruin everything. The plan was still in motion. I had made my choice. I grabbed a small bag, a clutch, said I was tired and needed to head out for a bit to be on my own. I knew the look that he was gonna have. He wouldn't know what to say. I needed a reason for this all, but this had to happen. He had been kind to me all my life, and it was hard knowing what to do and what I was about to do. I hugged him tight, so tight, the tightest he'd gotten in weeks. I didn't know if he saw it coming. He smiled gently and pressed a kiss to my forehead, a gesture of love and acceptance, a gesture that broke my heart. "I'll be here when you get back," he said, his voice soft and reassuring. Those were the words I needed to hear. His trust was a heavy weight on my shoulders as I slipped out the door, closing it gently behind me, severing the last tenuous connection to the life I had chosen. I was diving in without any knowledge of the consequences. Part 3. Downstairs, in the dimly lit, hushed atmosphere of the hotel bar, a space usually filled with the low murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses, sat David. He was positioned at a corner table, partially obscured by a potted palm, nursing a glass of amber liquid, his eyes fixed intently on the entrance, his gaze sharp and focused, as if he were expecting someone, as if he knew I would come. The room seemed to fade away, the other patrons blurring into an indistinct background as my focus narrowed to him. I could see him, and the rest was only background noise. He was dressed casually in a dark t-shirt and jeans, a stark contrast to the formal attire he had worn earlier in the day, a subtle rebellion against the expectations, against the constraints of our social facade. The muscles in his forearms were taut as he gripped the glass, a physical manifestation of the tension that permeated the air between us. He was all I saw. The moment he saw me, his eyes lighting up with a mixture of relief and anticipation, a slow, knowing smile spread across his face, a smile that was both alluring and dangerous, a smile that made my heart skip a beat, that sent a shiver of excitement and apprehension down my spine. It was a smile that promised pleasure, a smile that hinted at a shared secret, a smile that made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. "You came," he said, his voice a low, husky rumble that sent shivers down my spine, the sound both familiar and thrilling. He reached out a hand, his fingers brushing against mine, a casual touch that felt charged with electricity. There was no denying the connection, the magnetic pull that existed between us, a force that had been building for years, threatening to consume us both. "I had to," I replied, the words escaping my lips before I could stop them, a confession, a surrender, a validation of the reckless decision I had made. There was no going back now. I had crossed the Rubicon, burned all the bridges, and committed myself to a course of action that would forever alter the trajectory of my life. It was all a rush. We were committed, and there was no going back. We didn't talk much. There was no need for words, no need for explanations. The unspoken desire that had simmered between us for years, the years of longing glances and stolen touches, needed no articulation, no further justification. The air crackled with anticipation, with the unspoken promise of forbidden pleasure. We finished our drinks quickly, the silence between us thick with unspoken desire. He left a generous tip on the table and gestured for me to follow him. We walked out of the hotel, hand in hand, like accomplices in a crime, our footsteps echoing softly on the deserted sidewalk, our movements furtive, our eyes darting nervously around, as if we were afraid of being caught. The night wrapped around us. The next few hours were a blur of stolen kisses, desperate embraces, and whispered confessions, fragments of time that blurred together in a kaleidoscope of sensation. I didn't care what anyone thought. I felt a sense of freedom I never had. We drove his car. We found his spot. We were living in the moment. We went out. We went there. We were free and we had to take what we could. The guilt gnawed at me, a persistent nagging voice in the back of my mind, reminding me of my vows, of my commitment to Mark, of the pain I was inflicting on the man who loved me unconditionally. But the intoxicating thrill of finally surrendering to my desires, the intoxicating power of the forbidden, overpowered the guilt, silencing the voice of my conscience. It was always a constant battle. The moment seemed to overcome everything and I was free. I was never free with Mark. The time came for reality. I was never one to live in reality. He would drop me off in the front. I was on my own and this was something I had to overcome. I had a life with Mark, but not with David. David would do what he could, but I knew it wouldn't be the same. He was my only friend. So what were we doing? When I returned to the honeymoon suite, the room was dark, silent, and still, pregnant with the weight of my betrayal. Mark was asleep, sprawled on the bed, his face turned towards the window, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. His features were relaxed, serene, untouched by the turmoil that raged within me. I slipped into bed beside him, the silk sheets now feeling like a shroud, the weight of my guilt crushing me, suffocating me with remorse. I was sharing a bed with a stranger. Part 4. The next morning dawned bright and sunny, a cruel juxtaposition to the darkness that had settled over my soul. The sky was a brilliant azure. The ocean sparkled like a million diamonds, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of tropical flowers, all conspiring to create the illusion of paradise. But for me, paradise had become a prison, a gilded cage lined with guilt and regret. Mark was beaming, his face radiating happiness, his eyes sparkling with affection. He looked like a man who had everything he could ever want, a man who was blissfully unaware of the deception that had unfolded beneath his very nose. "Did you sleep well, honey?" he asked, pulling me close, his arm encircling my waist, his touch gentle and possessive. His warmth felt like a brand on my skin, a constant reminder of the intimacy I had betrayed, the trust one had shattered. I nodded, forcing a smile, summoning all my acting skills to project an image of contentment and serenity. The lies came so easily now, rolling off my tongue like practiced lines in a play, a performance I had perfected over the years, a mask I wore to hide the truth from the world. We spent the day exploring the resort, laughing, holding hands, taking pictures, trying to create the illusion of a perfect honeymoon, a curated collection of moments that would be immortalized on social media, a testament to our supposedly blissful union. We strolled along the beach, our toes sinking into the soft, white sand, the turquoise water lapping at our feet. We swam in the crystal-clear ocean, the warm waves washing over us, cleansing our bodies but unable to touch the darkness that festered within my heart. We lounged by the pool, sipping fruity cocktails, basking in the warmth of the sun, pretending that everything was perfect, that everything was right. But the guilt was a constant companion, a silent shadow that followed me everywhere, whispering in my ear, reminding me of my vows, of my commitment to Mark, of the pain I had inflicted on the man who loved me unconditionally. It was an insistent voice, a persistent tormentor that refused to be silenced. As the days turned into weeks, the guilt intensified, growing into a suffocating weight that threatened to crush me under its burden. I found myself pulling away from Mark, unable to bear his touch, his kindness, his unwavering trust. His very presence was a reminder of my betrayal, a constant accusation that I couldn't escape. The feelings were something I could no longer control. His trust seemed to cut deep, as he was one of the kindest people I knew, and he didn't deserve all this. I wish I would have been upfront with him, and now, things might be different. He sensed the distance growing between us, the subtle shift in my demeanor, the barely perceptible withdrawal from his affection. His brow furrowed with confusion and hurt, his eyes filled with a questioning gaze, as if he was trying to decipher the secret I was so desperately trying to keep hidden. He knew something was wrong. One evening, as we were getting ready for dinner, standing side by side in the bathroom mirror, our reflections staring back at us, two strangers sharing a space, Mark asked, his voice laced with a mixture of concern and apprehension, "Is something wrong, Em? You've been different lately. Distant. Unreachable." I knew I couldn't keep it hidden forever, that the truth, like a festering wound, would eventually erupt, exposing the rot that lay beneath the surface. I could no longer continue the charade, to live with the pretense, to carry the burden of my secret. It was time to lance the boil, to face the consequences of my actions. But before I could speak, before I could confess, before I could release the torrent of guilt and regret that had been building within me, my phone buzzed, a short, sharp vibration that shattered the silence and sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. A text message from an unknown number, a string of digits I didn't recognize, a message that sent a wave of panic crashing over me. He knows. Part 5. Panic surged through me, a cold, paralyzing wave that washed over my senses, leaving me breathless and disoriented. Who knew? How much did they know? Who had betrayed me, exposing my secret to the light? And most importantly, what were they going to do with this information? Was this a threat? A warning? Or the beginning of something far more sinister? My mind raced, desperately trying to make sense of the cryptic message, to identify the sender, to anticipate the repercussions. I excused myself abruptly, feigning a sudden, debilitating headache, clutching my temples and swaying slightly to emphasize my distress. It was a pathetic performance, a transparent attempt to buy myself some time, to escape the inevitable confrontation, but I had no other choice. I locked myself in the bathroom, the sterile, brightly lit space suddenly feeling claustrophobic and suffocating. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I frantically dialed David's number, my fingers fumbling with the screen, my heart pounding in my chest like a trapped bird. He had to know. He had to be warned. We had to prepare ourselves for whatever was about to happen. The phone rang and rang, each unanswered ring amplifying my anxiety, heightening my sense of dread. He didn't answer. He wasn't picking up. Had something happened to him? Was he already facing the consequences of our actions? Had he been silenced? I tried again and again, each attempt more desperate than the last, my voice rising in pitch as I left a series of increasingly frantic messages, begging him to call me back, pleading for information, warning him of the potential danger. But he remained unreachable, his phone going straight to voicemail, leaving me stranded, alone, and terrified, with no other options, and knowing that if he did say something to Mark, he would be very mad. So I ran to the bedroom, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. Mark was sitting on the edge of the bed, and I knew from one look, this wasn't Mark. "Who's he?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, but with an undercurrent of steel that I had never heard before, never seen. His face was pale, his eyes narrowed, his jaw tight. There was no more kindness, no more warmth, only a cold, hard fury that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. I knew then that the game was up. The truth was out, the secret exposed, the lies unraveling around me. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have possibly anticipated, was how much of the truth Mark possessed, the full extent of the deception that had been revealed. I felt trapped and I couldn't do what happened to me. I stammered, the word catching in my throat, searching for words, desperate to salvage the situation, to minimize the damage, to somehow explain the unexplainable. The moment seemed to freeze. "Don't lie to me, Emily," he said, his voice hardening, each word laced with venomous anger. "I know about you and David." The hotel security footage confirmed it. The security footage? My stomach dropped, the blood draining from my face. I hadn't even considered that possibility, hadn't even thought about the potential for surveillance, the ever-watchful eye of the camera. I was so caught up in the act, so consumed by my own desires, that I had completely overlooked the obvious. I'm not that person anymore. I hung my head, defeated, the fight draining out of me, the lies collapsing under their own weight. There was nothing left to hide, no more defenses to erect, no more excuses to offer. I can't feel it anymore. It was a mistake, Mark, I pleaded, my voice choked with tears, the words sounding hollow and insincere even to my own ears. It shouldn't have happened. I swear it didn't mean anything. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, his eyes blazing with a fury I had never witnessed before. He was no longer the kind, gentle, loving man I had married, but a stranger consumed by rage and betrayal. A mistake? On our wedding night? With my best friend? How could you do this to me? He was right. Before I could answer, before I could attempt to explain, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, a sharp, insistent knock sounded at the door, interrupting the volatile exchange. Mark was the devil, and I'll take his words. Mark stormed over to the door and flung it open, his face contorted with anger, his body trembling with barely suppressed rage. Standing there, framed in the doorway, flanked by two uniformed police officers, their faces impassive, their presence radiating authority, was David. What was the truth and the meaning of it all? "Mark," David said, his voice shaking, his eyes filled with remorse and fear, his body trembling visibly. "I need to confess something. Emily wasn't the only one involved. I need you to know. She asked me to kill you." The world went quiet. Everything went slow. I was truly shocked. My mouth opened, but the world went around and around.